Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. I'm really excited about today's episode because I was in LA when we filmed it, and I spent almost all of August in Los Angeles. And I have to say, being there now in comparison to when I used to live there full time is such a night and day difference. I feel like if I ever were to move back full time, I'd have so much of a community behind me through people that I've met. I don't know if that's just experience or age or whatnot, but being back in LA and filming this episode with Darren in person was really great. This is a perfect episode to listen to if you are a current or aspiring entrepreneur. Darren Marble is a serial founder, investor, and executive producer of a show called Going Public that is quite similar to Shark Tank. So, if you want to potentially raise money for your company, listen to this episode to get the ins and outs of how to do so, as well as how to potentially appear on his show. And following me on social media, you know that I started a new company, Chief Swag Officer, and we make all of the custom mic covers for hosts and podcasts. Last week, or I guess actually it's already Wednesday, earlier this week was a monumental moment. I saw Chief Swag product inches away from Jeremy Allen White's lips, and he is iconic to me. He is an actor from Shameless and The Bear. He's also, in my opinion, the hottest guy in the world. So Jeremy Allen White, I know you don't know Chief Swag Officer, or maybe you do, I don't know. But my product was as close to your lips as probably your now ex-wife. So that is super cool. Follow Chief Swag Officer at Chief Swag Office on social media, as well as this podcast at Dare to be Fearless, Dare to the number 2, be fearless, and my personal social media, Alexa_Curtis. I'm speaking at Harvard on October 6th. I think you can actually buy tickets to this keynote. So if you go to my Instagram, I've tagged Harvard a few times in posts, and I'll see a lot of you on October 6th. So during the filming of this episode, I have to be honest, the audio is quite shit. I really apologize for that. We were filming in a WeWork in LA, and somehow it just did not come through as good as I was anticipating. As I always talk about during these episodes, please connect with these guests. Everyone I have on the show is years ahead of where many young people are in their careers just from experience and age. And so if you listen to someone who inspires you, ask them to mentor you, I guarantee you will at least hear back from them.
Thanks, Alexa. It's great to be here. It's great to finally meet you. I've been following you for some time as well, so it's a pleasure to be here. And so I'm a serial founder, and my background is in sales. I'm really a salesperson at the core and a marketer at the core. The first business I started was a failed social networking site for filmmakers over 12, 13 years ago called Film Break. And I think every founder goes through this process of deciding, you know what, I'm going to take a leap of faith and go try to build something and start a company and see what happens. And what typically happens on that journey is you make a lot of mistakes because you just don't know what you don't know. And so I had that journey of making a lot of mistakes. I had raised a couple $100,000 for this company because I'm good at sales, had a little bit of a network, and generally don't like taking no for an answer. So I pitched a lot of people, raised some capital, and I didn't want to let my investors down. So as we recognized that that particular business was not viable, I decided to pivot, and we turned it into a marketing agency. And over several years, I built that agency up to a $2 million a year business. And we were marketing Kickstarter campaigns and Indiegogo campaigns. And so we learned the art of storytelling, digital marketing, a little bit of media buying, some PR. And then that kind of set the trajectory for me to move into the equity crowdfunding or online capital raising industry, where I now produce the Going Public series. I have Issuance, which is a fintech platform. That's a very short version.
Wow. Okay. So along the way, what about when you were growing up? Was entrepreneurship something that you wanted to do or proceed with?
No, it wasn't really on the radar. So taking a step back, I'm originally from the Bay Area. I was a straight A student. I went to a high school called Los Altos High School. I was a state champion high jumper.
Wow.
I then went to UCLA. I didn't want to go too far away from home and did track there for a year. Didn't like the coach, so left that. Joined a fraternity, still have some great friends there. Got a little sidetracked, if not a lot sidetracked in college, and I ended up dropping out of UCLA in my 5th year. Wasn't really going to class, and so,
Classic. 5 years? What were you doing for 5 years?
having fun,
Okay.
partying, going to fraternity
Okay.
parties,
That's an
like
expensive
just
party.
kind of lost myself in the social scene. And looking back, and there's a part of me that wishes I had graduated. And there were definitely parts of my entrepreneurial journey where I felt unequipped or ill-prepared to be running a business. All these things I didn't know. And I thought maybe if I had gone to this class or learned, entrepreneurial finance, I would be better at running a business. At the same time, we've ended up in a pretty decent spot with both of these companies just through trial and error, which is the harder way to do it, I think. But no, I didn't really have a sense of what I wanted to do in college. I was a psychology major, and when I dropped out, I was just looking for an income. And so I started doing different odd and end jobs, and ultimately found my way into sales. And that turned out to be something that I could really grab a hold of and saw myself excelling in pretty quickly. The first job that I really kind of leaned into was mortgage loan officer. And I was selling subprime loans before the crisis. And it was one of those jobs where you start kind of on the floor making cold calls. And the requirement was no matter who you were, what your background was, you had to make 400 calls an hour. No, sorry, 400 calls a day and 4 hours of phone time. And they had a system that would track, is this person making 400 outbound dials and are they on the phone? And the people that were able to graduate to the senior loan officer role 6 months later, you had to close 30 loans in 6 months. And if you didn't, if you were at 29 loans, you were fired. So that system was like a hardcore, almost like a boiler room style experience for people that sell loans and mortgage loan officers. But the people that got the 30 loans in 6 months, that could keep up that momentum and had that discipline, were truly all-stars. Okay. So the system worked, and that's where I learned to cold call. I learned to set appointments. I learned just to be massively action-oriented, which kind of set the trajectory for then a 10-year career in enterprise sales, getting into selling Oracle software, starting in inside sales, and then retired myself as a regional vice president of sales before I became a serial founder. So again, my background really is in high sales, complex sales, but started in a really hardcore kind of boiler room style job, hundreds of calls, which you rarely see that in people these days. And when I do see that kind of energy, I hire those people like right away because I know where it can take you.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. So with sales in particular, and what I love about going public, which I find is very different from a lot of founders, is a lot of people don't have the ability to be so well, or that's not the word, to appear so well like on camera and also have the experience with producing and whatnot and also run a company that is different than that show. So would you say that from your background in sales, etc., that's what's made you be able to be so personable to where you almost have this personality along with success as a founder?
That's a good question. I appreciate that. So thank you. I think of myself as, a likable guy. I'm social, some charisma, but try not to be, annoying people. Because people that are too charismatic, you kind of pull away from them. But in sales you learn, and we were doing, in Oracle sales, you're constantly showing up, and for us it was all over Southern California. You're meeting with buyers, you're meeting with CFOs, CEOs, chief information officers at billion-dollar businesses. It's a relationship, right? So you do need to be likable. You also need to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly savvy, incredibly patient, and you need to organize your team to come up with a strategy to sell, compete against SAP, other software companies, and win. And so I leverage my skill of being a likable salesperson to my advantage in business. And I think there's a lot of different paths that people can take to becoming a CEO of a billion-dollar company. There are definitely I guess this is an autist is like the new thing, like I'm an autist, and like,
what is that?
Well, someone who's like pseudo-autistic, right? I just saw some guy who sold his company to Twitter, and he's done it twice, and he was like, I wasn't able to raise money for the first 3 years of my business, then I pretended to be autistic, and I was like,
was he canceled?
No, he was able to raise millions of dollars by feigning a personality type that he thought was the type of person that would get invested.
Okay.
And it worked for him. In other words, I'm just saying that there are different personas that can succeed in the startup world. And sales is definitely one of them. It's certainly not the only one. I think of myself as a sales CEO. There are people that are brilliant technologists that are not necessarily likable. They don't have confidence when they speak, but they're fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And that can work too. You have people that are brilliant lawyers. They're securities attorneys, corporate lawyers. They can go on and found businesses and become successful. And then you have people in finance who can become brilliant leaders and have that as their kind of domain to back them up. So I do, I have a bias towards people that can sell because as a serial founder and just as a founder in general, you are constantly selling. You're selling your vision, your mission, your values to investors, to your employees, your team. You're selling it to the market, to your clients and partners. If you can't inspire people to join your mission, then hang up the cleats because it's not going to go well for you. So I do think of it as an advantage, and I try to lean into that. At the same time, I also know my weaknesses, and so I delegate. I bring people in that can complement my, what I think of as my key or extraordinary skill, the one or two things I'm really good at. There's a lot of things I'm terrible at or mediocre at. I find people that are way smarter than me, could be 10 years younger than me. In fact, one of my top advisors is a guy in Toronto named Evan. He's probably 12, 13 years younger than me, and I think of him as like way smarter than me.
Yeah.
He's my advisor, and age is just a number. And so he can kind of make up for the gaps that I have. And that's kind of how you build a team around you.
So when you hire now, or when someone reaches out to you, because you've really cultivated a following and very engaged community on X in particular, what really stands out to you? And on top of that, what do you think makes somebody like a good founder versus a great founder?
I think it's very simple. I think great founders are resilient, period. So, there's a lot of things that have to happen to build a successful company. But if I were to pick one that's more important than everything else, without a doubt, it is resilience. And the reason that is such a critical success factor to starting and building and scaling a company is because the road is paved with tremendous disappointment and tremendous struggle and frustration. And that's a hard truth. And it's not a struggle a couple days a week. It's a struggle for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. Disappointment, you can't generate revenue, you're not able to raise money, you raise money and you run out of money, you get sued, hacked, stalked, been through some weird things, as you know. These are obstacles, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and they happen all the time. And so people that lack resilience will fail. They might get the business going, they might have some advantage, maybe they know somebody in venture, they can raise $1 million, but that only carries you so far. And so the journey of entrepreneurship is a journey of overcoming obstacles and challenges, no matter what the fuck they are, and basically not having any excuses for failure. Doesn't matter what hits you, resilient founders find a way.
How do you become resilient? Is that something that's confidence that comes with experience? Is it something that some people have or they don't have, that ability to constantly bounce back? Because that's all it is. Even when it's like going well, then it can go down again and back and forth until I feel like it hits more even ground.
I think it can be learned. I do think some people are definitely like born with that trait, like they're just sturdy. And also, people that grow up in tough circumstances, people that grow up poor, people that grow up single parent, immigrants that come to this country with nothing. There's a reason you see some of the biggest companies in the world founded by immigrant founders. They've been through some fucking shit that would, the average person just can't comprehend or relate to. These are people that have overcome a lot already in their life before they're going to start a business. And then so as these business challenges occur to someone that has gone through a lot when they were younger, they're like, I can deal with this shit. Like this is par for the course. But I do think it can be learned. I think people can learn resilience it's a form of discipline, right? To me, resilience is a form of discipline. Where can you learn discipline? You can learn discipline in school. You can learn discipline in sports.
Interesting.
You know, how to train. I learned some of that resilience when I was younger, and I was a high jumper of all things. You show up every day, you push yourself, you got to outdo yourself. You win, lose, and most of the time you're losing and you keep getting back up. That is a form of resilience that I think people that play sports are highly competitive athletes. So I look for that, not necessarily like, what was your sport? Oh, you don't play sports, okay, you're not hired. But I do think that can create, a resilience to people.
You say discipline, and you've been sober for 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
What other elements aside from sobriety have enabled you to be such a disciplined founder? Because you also have a family. So, and you travel a lot. So there's a lot in that, somebody who's a single solo founder doesn't have to think about, but you must have to be extra disciplined because you've got other elements of your life aside from business.
Yeah. Look, I think in life you have to kind of choose where you're going to spend your time. And for me, I spend most of my time running my companies or with my family. So, like, one of my ironic truths is that I am a super connector. I love meeting people, right? You and I met through Twitter. I met a number of Cyan Bannister, one of our investors on X. We can talk about that. And I've met hundreds, thousands of people. I have 100 investors on my cap table. 100 people have said yes, which means I've pitched 3,000 or 4,000 people who have said no.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a lot of friends. And this is just the truth, right? I don't, and it's not an excuse, but if you really want to be successful in whatever it is you're doing, your job, with your family, the way you raise your children, in your career as a founder, you have to go all in. And so, I don't know, I think Randy Zuckerberg wrote a book about this, you got to choose 3 out of these 5. What do you want? Your work, your health, your fitness, your friends. You can't have it all. And so for me, I put a tremendous amount of time and energy into my companies and my family. And that means I'm not the guy that goes out on weekends with the homies. Not that I don't have any friends.
But your friends also must have families and kids, right?
They do.
Yeah.
But it's just, I find that to really get what I want out of my companies, I have to say no to a lot of other things.
Of course.
Now I get to travel a lot too. I'm in Miami, New York, Vancouver, Toronto, Vegas I love. But I'm very focused. And the sobriety thing you mentioned, I've been sober for 10 years. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I do a lot of mushrooms.
I was going to say, do you shrooms?
That's a joke. I don't do it. I've done all that stuff, and I don't miss it. And that is a key to my entrepreneurial passion and success. I'm able to put all of my time and energy into the things I want to work, which are my companies, which are very hard to make work. 9 out of 10 startups fail.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put 10 people in a row and they're all like, I'm going to start a business, 9 of those people, and it's not going to work out. So why not give yourself the opportunity to be that exception, because that's what it is. This is a game of exceptions. And for me, being completely sober and focused every single day puts me in the zone to have that potential to be successful.
Yeah, I was out with someone a few weeks ago in London, and I'm very neurotic about sleep. Do you sleep a lot?
I sleep well.
Yeah. I like 9 to 10 hours, minimum.
Yeah.
It was 11 p.m. and I was like, I literally need to go. And he was like, I understand you work for yourself. Isn't the point of you working for yourself so you can stay out late? And I was like, you are so stupid. Literally, no. That is not the point of working for yourself. You have the flexibility, but that doesn't mean that that discipline, there's no counterbalance between being able to stay out late because you work for yourself and then disciplining yourself the next day. It's almost the opposite of that, in my opinion, because the more disciplined you can be, the more regimented you can be in terms of a routine, the better you'll do. So for you personally, with a routine, is there anything that you do in the morning, on weekends, whatnot, that keeps you on some form of a routine?
I try to exercise. That's the one thing that's kind of in the middle of all this that keeps me sane.
Yeah.
Right, and mentally fit. When you're running a company, you're kind of always on. There are times when I work weekends, and usually when I'm working weekends, I'm enjoying that work. It's actually very productive work because you're not distracted with, oh, I got all this shit in my calendar and this call and this meeting. You're free, and then you can kind of choose to work on a weekend. But just doing what's needed, and every now and then taking a step back and trying to assess what's working, what's not working, is something broken, what do we need to fix, and being honest with yourself, because there's a lot of fixing that has to happen in the course of building a company.
So when it comes to X, like Twitter in particular, when did you start on there? How did you realize that you were gaining a voice? And predominantly, who would you say is most of your core following on there? Because the event we were at last night, it was like 90% men, and they all are just obsessed with you in real life, but also on Twitter.
Well, I love that platform, right? I think you and I both appreciate the value of that platform and what it can do for your brand and your businesses and et cetera. I've been on it, since the early days, but really started dialing into it like in the last few years. And I think what's worked for me on X or Twitter is being known for one thing. And this is, I think, really important for any founder. We all have a brand out there in the world, whether we like it or not, right? You have a brand. And when people think of Alexa, they're going to think of podcast, hustler, Disney, maybe just one thing. And so if there's one thing that people are going to recognize you by, that's probably the one thing you want to talk about consistently over and over and over and over again, as if you've never talked about it before. And this is hard for a lot of people to do because it feels like they're being repetitive.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, these tweets come and go. It's there and then it's gone, right? And so most people are not seeing that content. So I like to stay in my lane. I would say 90% of my content is capital raising and entrepreneurship focused. And that's helped me build a brand as someone who knows a lot about entrepreneurship and capital raising, and that drives a lot of inbound interest in my companies, products, services. Companies apply to our show, they want to license our software. And then I definitely use it to connect. I've raised millions of dollars off of Twitter, off of LinkedIn, and a lot of that's inbound, by the way. Like, people think of these platforms as like, I'm going to go hit an investor. Well, guess what? That investor has been hit 50 times already today by 50 other people who are pitching them something. They want their money. The key is, how can you get that investor to come to you?
Yeah.
It's not as easy, right?
No.
But if you can, educate and be known for one thing and provide value, and everybody has some expertise that the rest of the world would love to learn more about. So being confident in sharing your expertise, and trying to come up with a strategy to drive inquiries into your DMs versus just hitting people, pitching, which is what everybody does, then you can actually, generate investor interest and leads. And but a lot of times it does work the other way. Like I told you, so Cyan Bannister, famous investor, she's a phenomenal human. She is famous for being an uber seed investor. She was in the seed round, the first money in, and turned it into $200 million, right? Tens of thousands of dollars into hundreds of millions of dollars is kind of like the dream every angel investor has. Nobody ever achieves it.
How do you think she got that first 50 though? Was that just personal money, or?
She was in the technology industry from a young age, and she now is in Marin, originally from, I think, the Bay Area. And she made a little money from one of the companies she was at, and then started asking, what do I do with this capital? That I have a little bit to invest in. I don't think she said, what do I do? How do I invest? People said, you should invest in startups. This is what we do.
Yeah.
But what I was saying with Cyan is that I had been in her DMs for like 2 years, just trying to get her attention. Hey, Cyan, over here, we're doing this show. I'm raising money. We're doing this.
Would she reply during this?
Barely.
Okay.
Like, once she replied, she's like, this looks cool. And that was it. And then 2 years went by. And then as we were filming season 2, we had a challenge where we needed an investor to play an undercover VC, which is the 4th episode in season 2 of Going Public, which we just released. And I sent her a message, probably like my 50th message, okay? And I was like, hey, Cyan, now we are filming an episode and we're looking for an undercover VC. And that was basically it. She's like, oh, this sounds phenomenal. And she's like, here's my number, let's chat. And then we talked. A week later, she flew down to LA. We filmed with her in Beverly Hills. And that episode, which also featured one of our other investors, Gail Wilkinson from Vitalize Ventures, Vitalize Angels, that was like the hit episode of the show. It really caught the audience's attention. It's got a lot of positive feedback. So it's not to say you can't go out and reach out and make things happen, because people do that. I've done it. It's just harder to do. But that's what it takes. It's a little bit of both. It's kind of being known for one thing, being very consistent, and speaking your mind.
Do you have a process for like cold pitching somebody or cold emailing them to get in the door? Because you said 3,000 to 4,000 people you've perhaps asked to invest, and you have 100, so that rejection rate's high, but that's for anyone in business. So are all of those people cold emails, or are some of them warm intros?
I mean, if I had to guess, I would say I've probably raised close to $15 million for my two companies. If I were to bucket it out, I would say 20% outbound, 20% inbound, 20% referrals. Like, this is very broad. A little bit of everything, right? We've kind of raised capital every which way. I've paid to pitch at my company in New York and gone down weird, windy roads, and ended up pulling a billionaire investor out of that opportunity. Chris Birch, who's the co-founder of Tory Burch.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I'm the sucker that's like gone down weird paths, like maybe this will work, maybe that will work, maybe I'll hire a consultant, maybe I'll pay this guy 10 grand to go to New York, and maybe he'll bring me investors, maybe I'll DM 100 people, tried it all. And so I've got a pretty good sense of what works, what doesn't work, and I would say the key to raising capital, because I know this is one of the questions, is like, you have to have traction. Like, this is what, a lot of founders now know this, but if you're a first-time founder and you're raising money, the idea that you're gonna raise a pre-seed round on your idea is bullshit. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen. It rarely happens. And when it does happen, there's an exception. This is somebody that sold their last company for $500 million or returned a lot of capital to their early investors. But for everyone else, you're never going to raise money on an idea. The entire point of entrepreneurship is you have to be able to go from 0 to 1. You have to create something from nothing, which is the hardest work, and you have to do that on your own with no fucking help. And then, if you can do that, and then do it again and again, now you've got this track record of doing the impossible, because this shit isn't easy. And then you're in a position to go out and raise 100 grand, $1 million, $10 million. But a lot of founders still try to like deny the reality of that. It's like, we're gonna pretend there's no gravity. Like, we're just gonna go, we want $1 million. I hear, I get referred to people all the time. They're like, hey, I've got this deck. What do you think of my deck? I'm having trouble raising. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm building an app. Okay, where's your app? Well, I need money to build it. I'm like, no, next, not happening. Why would you need money to build an app? Like,
it's expensive.
Well, it's not expensive. Like, you can build apps for free. You can do it on like ChatGPT. There's like AI programs. And okay, let's say your app is different. Your app is $1 million to build. Go find someone to build it. And so now it's a question of, can you find somebody and convince them that your vision is worthy and viable, and find a builder? Because if you're not I'm not a builder, but my co-founder is, and we founded a business together, and now we each own a chunk of equity in a tech company. So that's it. Like, you have to have some traction in order to raise capital. I don't care what the product is, what the service is, what industry you're in, tech, physical goods, doesn't matter. You have to demonstrate your ability to execute and do something pretty impressive with basically no resources to attract the attention of real investors.
Would you say that most founders get invested because of them as the founder and not the product?
Well, that's a huge part of it, right? I think that on the investor side, you're looking for exceptional people. And kind of that's it. Like, it's almost irrelevant. I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's almost irrelevant. Like, if I think you're an exceptional human, which, by the way, I think you're exceptional next time. If you're like, I'm raising capital. If I had capital, I would, at this moment, you kind of just, you have to find exceptional people, because the business has often changed. They pivot. This, like, my own first company, we were doing this and we did that. That's very common. So I think on the investor side, you're looking for exceptional people. And yeah, it's, you hear this phrase, like they're looking for the jockey, not the horse. And that's kind of what we do in our show as well. Like we're profiling the founder. Who is the person behind the vision, behind the business? And how can we pull out their true character and pull it out in a way that's entertaining, informative, and provides access so viewers can learn about the companies and invest while they watch. It's a profile of a founder, under stress, under extreme circumstances. So yeah.
Tell me about the show. So how did this idea come to fruition? It's got kind of a Shark Tank vibe to it.
So my co-founder, Todd Goldberg, took me out to dinner in July of 2017, and he was helping take a med device company public. And I was also taking a company public as a marketing agent. And what happened was Todd was at this med device company. He had been there for 7 years. The company was doing an IPO to NASDAQ. When the IPO happened, Todd went to the chairman and said, great news, I've got 100 people in my network, friends and family who know me, who've been following my journey for years. They would like to invest in the IPO. And he thought he was doing the chairman a favor. The chairman says, Todd, that's not how this works. In this process, the IPO shares are reserved. They're allocated for institutional investors. Todd didn't know what an institutional investor was, and you probably wouldn't unless you've gone through that process. And that didn't sit well with him. He's like, that's not right. Why can't my friends and family invest in this company? I don't get it. They can only buy shares after the IPO, after it's public. And so he approached me because we were pioneering the online capital raising industry, and we were doing an IPO where everyday Americans were able to buy IPO shares at the IPO price. It was an historic Reg A plus IPO. And he took me out to dinner at Steakhouse, and he said, I've got an idea for a show, like Shark Tank, where viewers can invest in the featured companies while they watch. And I think you're a guy that knows about this space and how the mechanics work. And I said, Todd, as your really good friend, this is a dumb idea, dude. I was like,
classic.
I've heard this pitch like 50 fucking times. You're number 51, and you don't know this, but in our industry, everybody has an idea for the show.
Yeah.
I know bankers that want to make this show. I know guys in Hollywood. I know founders of big companies that want to star and host it. And he's like, okay, where's the show? And of course, it didn't exist. And the reason it didn't exist is because it's very complicated. It's a 10-piece puzzle. And there's multiple things that are needed to bring a show like this to life. So the analogy I always use is, it's like saying, I want to build a rocket and go to Mars. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
What does it take? It's almost impossible, right? Maybe there's one person who can do it. So, he helped me to realize that it didn't exist and that together we could put those components together. And so we did. And it took us several years. And in fact, our own traction, the first thing we did that was like our heroic execution, a proof of execution, we signed a distribution deal for season 1 with Entrepreneur Media. They run the website entrepreneur.com.
Mm-hmm.
They also have another show, Elevator Pitch, which a lot of people have heard of. And we took this pitch to them and had this vision. We're going to make a show where we follow stories, we're going to raise money, produce it, and we need a home for it. We need to be able to distribute the show on a platform that already has an audience. We love your audience. They're entrepreneurial, they're executives, they own franchises, and we negotiated that contract. It took us 16 months.
Wow.
So that's how complicated the deal was. Because there's all these questions they ask, like, well, wait a minute, is this legal? How does this work? What happens if these companies go bankrupt? Are we gonna get sued? Who's liable for the statements? 16 months of that. Once we signed that distribution deal, that was the traction. That was us going from 0 to 1. We didn't have a show, but we had a distribution deal. So then we were able to go out to the market and pitch investors. And we said, look, we have a home for the show. This is a linchpin for our business. If you give us money, we will produce a show. Here's our production company. They're ready to engage. I Need Entertainment, they're an Emmy-nominated production company. We'll produce it, we'll cast it, and then we're going to stream it on entrepreneur.com. And we raised a few $1 million with that pitch.
What happens if a company goes bankrupt from something that's invested in on the show?
So what happens is the investors lose their money,
Yeah.
right? So if you invest $500 in a company on our show, right, or a company that's raising capital online from retail investors under a securities exemption called Reg CF, you've invested $500 in a company that failed, and so you lose your investment. And so companies have to go through a particular process to raise capital this way. They have to provide disclosure. They have to provide reviewed or audited financials. They have to file a document with the SEC called a Form C that says, hey, Alexa, we're early stage. This is high risk. These are all the risks. And Alexa, here's our financials. We've never turned a profit. You're investing your $500 into a company that's never been profitable.
Yeah.
You're investing into a company that's only a year old. Our company only has 5 employees. That's the kind of disclosure that you have to provide so that you can actually raise capital from the crowd, from retail investors. So there's a high risk, but what we believe is that the everyday American deserves that opportunity, and they deserve to be an owner of a company that they're a customer of. Why shouldn't they be able to be an owner? So the upside is that maybe you turn your $500 into $5,000, and 2 years later the company you see in our show goes public, is acquired. But there's also a high degree of risk because these are early stage companies. They're not doing $1 billion in sales. Now, they're also not Shark Tank companies. We're not casting like the guys who are like, I have an idea. These are companies that are doing $10 to $50 million in revenue. We talk about these companies, they're Series A scale-up businesses, but they're still risk.
Yeah.
So that's what happens.
So interesting, and that's, I guess, why the name Going Public is so cool and cute and serendipitous. What was I going to say? Oh, are you looking for talent? If somebody's listening and has a company that they think could be a fit for the show?
Absolutely. We're constantly casting. We had over 200 applications for season 2, even more for season 1.
Okay.
Companies can go to goingpublic.com and click apply.
I can't believe you have that domain, goingpublic.com.
I'm a brand builder.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I believe in building big brands.
That's
so
awesome.
we own goingpublic.com, we own issuance.com. We have a trademark for the phrase going public for entertainment purposes.
Cute.
We have a trademark for click to invest, scan to invest.
Wow.
Not that you need, a brand like that. I mean, there's Google, like they created a word and it's like everybody knows the word. But, we like big.coms, and we're actually the #1 search result on Google
That's
when
incredible.
you type in going public.
Wow. Oh my God. What makes you fearless?
I think just being in the hot seat now for so long, and I'm in my mid-40s. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot of shit, and I've overcome pretty much all of it. So I think there's this point where in your founder journey, you go through so much crap that one day you wake up and you're like, I'm unfucking stoppable.
Yeah.
Like, nothing will fucking stop.
No.
I've been in that mode for several years now.
Yeah.
Nothing intimidates me, nothing scares me. You expect things to go wrong, you expect things to break, and I'm in the zone of like, I know something's not gonna work, but I know I can overcome it.
Yeah.
And, I've been through some extreme circumstances. So it's just, again, it's that resilience.
Yeah.
You build it up over time too.
You are such a joy as a human and also such a successful entrepreneur. So I loved literally everything you said. I love the show. I love the name of the show. I think it's great. I'm going to put that in the show notes. Where can everyone follow you, connect with you, find you on social media?
Hit me on X at Darren Marble. You can watch our show at goingpublic.com. If you are a company that has a community, customers, fans, and followers, you're thinking of raising capital from your community, you can go to issuance.com and see if we could be a fit to help you do one of those raises.